Taxes was feeling so stuck. Sitting in traffic, squeezing into a parking spot, all to squeeze in getting tax help during your lunch break. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert who does your taxes for you, while you go about your day getting real-time notifications about their progress and the most money back guaranteed. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Welcome to the podcast. If you'd like to listen to an ad-free version of this episode and all of our episodes, then search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts and press subscribe. That's our premium channel where all of our ad-free and advanced episodes live, all in one place. True Crime Today Premium Plus. Search it on Apple Podcasts and press subscribe. Even try it for 3 days free.
The blood washed away, but the guilt never does. Welcome to Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi, featuring psychotherapist and author Shavaun Scott.
Well, the new year has certainly started off very eventful with the New Orleans terrorist attack and also what seems to look more and more to be related, the Cybertruck explosion at the Trump Las Vegas hotel right in the entryway there. Which, incidentally, we were standing there picking up a cab earlier this year. We were at the mall right next door, and that was just where the Uber went to. And it was like, oh, my God, we were right there. It's kind of disturbing. Joining me to discuss all of this, Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author of the book, The Minds of Mass Killers. Get it wherever you get books. And I thought of you right away on this one because this is another mass killer situation. I'm just going to open it up to you. What was your initial thoughts here as these stories started coming in over the last handful of days?
Yeah, somebody wants to give us a message, right? Which is why we call it terrorism, because it terrorizes the population and with this kind of extremist ideology, which was discovered pretty much right away in New Orleans, there's a clear message that someone, and often it's a group of someone's, even if that individual is not meeting up in person with the group, they're radicalized online most of the time. And it's usually a younger male who has a lot of anger. There's not classic mental illness, but this ideology takes on a paranoid thinking quality in their mind, and it becomes a rationale for their anger. And the more they immerse themselves in it, they become angrier and angrier, and they start this us and them kind of thinking distortion, that they are the holy warriors and they're willing to sacrifice their lives for a cause. So there's an element of grandiosity and that look at me as I do something incredibly wonderful, and they celebrate it when other people do these kinds of things. But there's not typically the kind of criminal history that you would see with somebody who's, a psychopath or something like that. The other thing that's really interesting about these guys, I have a whole chapter on extremist mass killers in my book. Yeah. Is that you find them from the political far right, you find them from the political far left, you can find them with Christian ideologies. I think of the Daybells, who were, in their mind, directed by God to kill innocent people and children. And a couple of examples that come to mind were Ted Kaczynski, who was deadly and did so much carnage, and he identified as being far left. And then you had Tim McVeigh, notorious, who identified as being far right, both white guys. And you find this similar psychological process. White supremacists. A lot of the people who commit these things are white supremacists. And so, what has the flavor of a religion, sometimes it's more secular and more political. But the politics and the religion often get mixed together. And there's nothing I don't think as dangerous as a holy warrior.
And what's interesting about this one, Timothy McVeigh would have been similar. He's a former military and such. These two, both of them from both the Las Vegas and from the New Orleans, both former military folks, U.S. Army, both U.S. Army actually. And what we're learning now is there's some overlap of time where they both served at the same place at the same time. And as of our recording, there's a lot of research going into that right now. As of this moment, we just don't know whether that overlapping service at Fort Bragg indicates some sort of connection. I would say it would be very shocking if it did not, the coincidence that this all kind of puts together. But the fact that these two guys are American citizens, one in Texas, the other in Colorado Springs, Colorado, both have lived their lives here in the country. The one from New Orleans, where obviously there was far more carnage, spent 10 years in the Army, has 2 kids, some failed divorces, failed marriages, twice divorced, financial difficulties, living in squalor, basically, as I've heard a lot of publications call it out. When they're from here, this is very different than like a 9/11 type terrorist. This is someone who has been, indoctrinated into some sort of ideology, but these were American citizens. These are American citizens who invested a good chunk of their life into their country, in service of their country. I think a lot of people's heads kind of spin going, how did we go from that to this?
Yeah. And this is something that's not commonly understood. I think I go over the data to some degree in the book, but a lot of mass killers, often the shooters, have a military history, which is why they're so comfortable with firearms. And often in the lives of, the teenage mass killers, the school shooters, they often have a parent with a military history. So there's something about the comfort with weaponry and violence and explosives. I think sometimes a person who has been increasingly radicalized through their online activities, their thinking becomes very distorted, and logically it doesn't add up, but that's sort of the human mind. They can be very emotionally driven, and here's a reason for their anger. And I think a lot of people have anger about a lot of things, and then they latch on to this belief system, and all of a sudden they have justification for it, which feeds it. And they study other similar people online. They copycat. There's patterns that you see over again. Certainly, they're not all identical. You will find different life histories with them, but the psychological process is very similar, even with those in foreign countries.
I think what makes it kind of shocking is you just think about how folks grow up here in America, and you think about how folks grow up in foreign countries, specifically like Saudi Arabia and such, where we saw the 9/11 attackers, majority of them coming from. And it's obviously insanely different. One, you have cultures that really, promote a level of violence. And I'm not saying all as a whole. So before anybody's like, not everybody, of course they're not. But you certainly have more groups out there in the public that are accepted as basically a sect of a public group. And it's pretty large. We don't necessarily have like there's no ISIS coffee shops at the end of the road. Are there people out there who sympathize? Sure. But it's not to the level that we see mass quantities of them as we would in the Middle East and such. So to be radicalized, they go online and they begin that radicalization process. But again, what's shocking, I think, to most is the recipe that would have built somebody over there to fall in that line. I understand that a little bit more over there because it's a messed up way of thinking to begin with, so I can see how you can easily fall into that. When you're here and you've done such a chunk of your life in American society in service to your country, to suddenly flip that around and somehow believe that the best option for whatever your cause is to go run over a bunch of drunk people on New Year's Eve. Yeah. What are you demonstrating? Like what is going on in that mind that this is the religious cause or this is the solution to your problems?
Yeah. It's not terribly rational, is it? It doesn't make sense. But culture teaches us who the enemies are. And it teaches us that there's virtue in killing the enemies. And it also shows the power of online culture. That these people typically, if you trace their steps online, you'll find that they have spent years often immersed in online cultures. And of course, they're communicating with actual ISIS people in the Middle East online because these people do all find each other. We see the same thing with the incel culture. You think, how can people become so warped in their perceptions that it's acceptable to just go out and try to murder a group of sorority sisters, or whatever, plow into a group of women on a sidewalk, which happened in Canada. Yep. And it's we like to think, I think most of us who use online space for Facebook or showing pictures of our pets and our vacations, it's hard to imagine somebody that goes into a hate group online. But these guys will spend hours and hours and hours in virtual spaces, and it does impact their thinking.
Welcome to the podcast. If you'd like to listen to an ad-free version of this episode and all of our episodes, then search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts and press subscribe. That's our premium channel where all of our ad-free and advanced episodes live, all in one place. True Crime Today Premium Plus. Search it on Apple Podcasts and press subscribe. Even try it for 3 days free.
You're in the thick of a true crime saga, every detail sinking in, and then, wham, a commercial about something you couldn't care less about. It's like being served a microwaved dinner at a 5-star restaurant. But it doesn't have to be this way. Go for True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts. With True Crime Today Premium Plus, you get uninterrupted, ad-free episodes, extended interviews that dig even deeper into the muck, and early access so you can brag to your friends. It's like ordering the secret menu at a crime buffet. So, search for True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and savor every twisted detail without interruption.